Welcome to the Republican Professor. Today we have Lisa Ekman on, who's going to share with us about leaving the progressive cult. That's how you called it, right?
That is, yes, indeed.
Well, welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here, Professor.
Lisa's joining us from Virginia, and you guys just had an election for governor. So,
We did, yes. It was not very close, and
mm,
uh,
yeah.
Democrat Abigail Spanberger won.
Mhm.
And so it should be an interesting 4 years here in our lovely Commonwealth. So,
Now, Youngkin, was he not running again?
Virginia passed a term limit for governors of 1 term, so he was not able to run again. His lieutenant governor, um, Winsome Sears ran,
Hmm.
and yeah, she lost. I think it was the last I looked. They hadn't finished counting, but it was like 16 points, so it wasn't. It was not very close, which was a little bit disappointing and shocking, especially given some of her answers and her debate performance, but also her failure to denounce her attorney general candidate in the Democratic Party, who also ended up winning last night,
Hmm.
sadly. And as a
Yeah.
what I call myself a recovering attorney, knowing that he's going to be the chief, law enforcement officer for the Commonwealth, with some of the comments he made about Republicans is pretty scary for me, as or scary as well, because I think we have gotten to a point where um, people are very fast and loose with the way they talk about politics and violence and
Mm.
about speech itself. And so we'll see how this all turns out. But, last night was, I do not think, a victory for freedom, liberty, and our republic in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Mm. Wow. How long have you been a Republican?
So I will be very,
Or I'm assuming you
very,
are.
I'll be very clear. I left the Democratic Party in 2020, and we can talk about
Wow.
how that happened. So during COVID, that really opened my eyes. At the moment, I would consider myself an independent.
Okay.
I am voting almost straight Republican because the most important thing to me is who is going to protect our constitutional rights and act in line with our Constitution. I can't say that that's always going to be the Republican, but at the moment, that's where I find myself fitting best. And I think it's also the case that I'm just a little bit, um, I don't know, maybe the right word is scarred on political parties at the moment, just because of what happened, with my last dedication. So
Mm.
I voted for President Trump in 2024. I voted for Glenn Youngkin in 2022, and I can't foresee myself voting for a Democrat in the future, in the near future, unless things radically change. And so, while I we don't have to declare a party here in Virginia for voting, and so, but I would say I'm most closely aligned with Republicans on most of the issues at the moment. So,
Gotcha. So, um, you mentioned you were a recovering attorney. What do you
yeah.
what do you mean by that? Can you explain that?
What I mean is that I'm no longer a member of any bar, and I'm not currently practicing. But I have a law degree from Georgetown, and I was a member of the Illinois bar because that's where I grew up, and so I uh, that was where I decided to get my license, even though I never technically practiced. I didn't need my law degree for the work that I was doing in Washington, D.C. I was an advocate and lobbyist on behalf of people with disabilities.
Mm.
So I did that work. Both, I actually worked for federal agencies at one point. I worked in the United States Senate for a couple of senators who you might we might have called liberal lions of the late 20th and early 21st century. And then I worked for a variety of nonprofit organizations as well as government contractors, all around disability policy.
Gotcha. Wow. Which senators did you work for? Do you want to say?
Sure. And I was on detail to those senators from a federal agency as part of a management training program that I was in. So I worked for Ted Kennedy and Tom Harkin.
I've
Um,
heard of, yeah, I've heard of them.
yes, they're pretty well known, and they're pretty darn liberal. So it
Yeah.
kind of gives you a sense of where my head used to be.
How did
I
you get interested in the disability service side?
So I also, in addition to my JD, have a master's in social work, and so I was getting that degree out at the University of Denver, and I realized that I really couldn't work directly with clients and keep my own mental health in balance, and so I decided I wanted to go into policy, and I wanted to go to Washington and give a voice to people who didn't always have a strong voice and often couldn't go to Washington themselves to represent themselves. And so that's how I sort of got involved in disability policy through the Presidential Management Internship Program, which was a program that was created by Jimmy Carter to draw people with graduate education into federal service.
Hmm.
And so I was nominated by the dean of my social work school for the program, got accepted, and then went and interviewed with a number of agencies and ended up at the Social Security Administration working for a uh, political appointee at the very tail end of the Clinton administration.
Wow.
Yeah, trying to help people with disabilities go back to work. That was the focus of that particular position, was on employment for people with disabilities.
Gotcha. Wow. So, how many agencies have you worked for? Federal agencies have you worked for?
So I worked for, let's see, one agency, except I also did do an internship at the Court of Federal Claims, if you're at all familiar with them. They are, in case anyone listening isn't, if you have a contract with the federal government and you have issues with that contract, that is the venue. They have jurisdiction over that, as well as jurisdiction over tribal matters
Mm-hmm.
with
Hmm.
the tribe. And so I worked there, and then I worked for, I would say, three government contractors and about eight different nonprofits, because I did a stint where I was had my own consulting business. So I was a consultant to a number of nonprofits around disability policy.
I see. Okay. And are you retired now?
I would consider myself retired, except that I have a farm, and
Hmm. Wow.
anybody who tells you that a farmer is retired has never tried to work a farm. So
How long have you had a farm?
my partner and he and I bought the farm in 2020. So
Oh,
right after
okay.
my awakening in Washington, D.C., I decided to get out of D.C. I also decided I wanted to grow some of my own food and have a little bit more sustainable lifestyle than I did when I lived in Washington, D.C. So.
Hmm. Okay. Now, do you remember what the issue or set of issues was in that run up to buying that farm that caused you to make a transition in terms of political party?
Sure. I would need to go back a little bit to relate a story that my I unfortunately lost both of my parents in within a couple of years of each other, and had a lot of interaction with what I now call our sick care system,
Wow.
and instead of healthcare.
Hmm.
Yeah, so my dad had surgery and then had a bunch of catastrophic complications, ended up functionally quadriplegic with adrenal failure. And my mom, who had multiple sclerosis already at the time, was his primary caregiver. Developed cancer and was diagnosed at a stage 4 of an extremely aggressive cancer that had spread pretty much everywhere in her body. And she decided that she was going to get conventional treatment, but she was given the "you may have a few months to live, get your affairs in order" speech. And she said to me, "Lisa, I'm going to so if there's anything to to live, I'm willing to do it. Will you do some research for me?" And so that was right up my alley. Even though I never worked for, I worked with the Department of Health and Human Services all the time, NIH, CDC, and I did this kind of research for a living. So I said, "Sure, Mom, first thing is stay off the internet because whatever you see there is not going to be uplifting and help you
Yeah.
back in these days."
Right.
So I did a bunch of research and, found a lot of things that were really, really helpful. Turns out, there's a lot known about cancer that, our sick care system doesn't seem to tell people. And, so I found a couple of books, one being um, called Beating Cancer with Nutrition, and the other one, Anti-Cancer, A New Way of Life. And they both were very, scientific, lots of data, evidence, studies, all of that. And really said that, if you deal with the toxic exposure that your body's getting and you give your body nutrition, your body can pretty naturally beat cancer. So, I relayed these findings to my mom. We got her to a naturopath. We changed her diet. We changed everything she put in and on her body, cleaned her house with, and also worked on how she was dealing with stress. And we did guided meditation, and we did focused breathing, and we did other things to help her deal better with her stress. And so she had surgery, and she started a round of chemotherapy, which was going to be 6 treatments. And by the time she took her 3rd treatment, she was cancer free. And her doctor was astounded. He said, "I've never seen this with this cancer. This is like a miracle. I don't know what you're doing, but keep it up." And then she finished, he suggested she finish the other 3 chemo treatments, which she did. And, she was cancer free for 2 years. And at that point, she had a scan and there was a tiny little growth. And she then her doctor immediately suggested more chemotherapy, which she took, and her kidneys shut down as a result. The chemo fried her kidneys. And chemotherapy has been around for 50 years, hasn't improved much, and it's basically poison. And the whole idea with it is that we're going to try to poison the cancer cells enough to kill them without killing the host, you.
Right. Right.
But in this case, it did. It killed her. It fried her kidneys, and she died of kidney failure about a month after that chemo treatment. And so, this was, and during her treatment, her doctor said things to me like, "Well, it doesn't matter what she eats. It doesn't matter," which there's plenty of research to show that it actually does matter quite a bit. For example, sugar feeds cancer.
Hmm.
Cancer eats sugar. So if you eliminate sugar from your diet, you help starve the cancer, and you feed your normal cells. But at any rate, this was pretty devastating to me, obviously, to lose both my parents in 2 years, and my mom died in 2016. And I learned an awful lot of things about what actually makes us sick, what keeps us healthy, all those things. But it kind of had, and it started to create a lot of cracks in my belief in these institutions that I had worked so closely with. But I kind of had to pigeonhole them and put them in the back of my mind because I needed to go back to work and go back to DC and start working with those agencies again. Fast forward to 2020 when um, uh, I had actually scheduled myself to retire March 31st of 2020 from the work that I was doing, because I had also seen DC change in a really negative way over the 20 years that I had been there. When I first got there, I felt like I could make a difference. I felt like people had good faith conversations in which they were trying to come to um, a compromise in policy that obviously no one's ever fully satisfied with a compromise. That's the nature of compromise, but that everybody at the table thought that their opinions were heard and that we were moving incrementally forward for the country and making the policy better. By I would say around, sometime during Obama's second term, really, that was no longer the case. Everything had gotten so tribal. Everything was so, the other side is bad. And I can't even tell you how many times I sat in a meeting where someone might say, policy wise, I 100% agree with you, but politically that's going to look bad or that's going to cost us or, that
Mm.
kind of thing. And we can't let the other side have a win. And it just got to the point where I didn't feel like I could make a positive difference anymore in DC. And I'm not sure how much I ever could, but it started feeling a lot less like I could as time went on. And so 6 months before that, I had scheduled my retirement for March 31st of 2020. And if you can put your mind back to that time, that was when we were just coming out of 2 weeks to flatten the curve
Yeah,
for COVID, right?
sure.
Um, and so there were some and at the beginning of COVID, I was 100% listening to what our agencies were saying and doing what they asked me to because I didn't want to hurt anyone or kill grandma, as they were telling us, kill anyone's grandma. Um, but there were things that they were recommending right from the get go that, because of the research I did for my mom, really didn't make any sense. And so it was starting, it was raising some questions for me. And one of those things was, that I share often as a story is that at the very beginning, they told us we couldn't leave our house. If you were not an essential worker, you had to stay inside. And, one of the best things you can do for your health is get
Yeah,
sun for vitamin D, right? And vitamin D, you go to the NIH website, tons of studies about how important that is for staying healthy. So why in the world, especially in this instance, I have a backyard, can I go
mhm.
in my own backyard and get some sun? The answer was no, stay in your house. You're not
Jeez.
essential. Walk down the street and your neighbor might turn you in, or the police might stop you and say, hey, are you an essential worker? So this was sort of raising some alarm bells for me a little bit. But at the same time, that in and of itself did not cause me to really completely wake up to reality, as I say. What did is that my partner Jamie, who was my boyfriend at the time, and I were going at it because he was, not buying what I would call the government's COVID narrative from the get go. And so, as you might imagine, we were having some debates, some lively debates sometimes, as a matter of fact. And during one of those debates, I said to him, Jamie, I just can't believe it. I can't believe the agencies I've worked with, the people that I've worked with at these agencies would do this to us without the data and evidence to support it. And he looked me in the eyes and he said, Lisa, if they'll poison our water, what won't they do?
Whoa.
And I believed already that, there are things that are done with our um, municipal water treatment facilities that are, in fact, causing a lot of problems for people. I had learned about this when I was helping my mom. We got her a strong reverse osmosis filter, got one for myself, and if they would do that, water is the most essential thing for us. If we don't have it for 72 hours, any fluids, we can die. So
Sure.
if that's true, why would I believe they wouldn't these other things without data and evidence?
Mm.
The other thing that started happening around that time was the censorship. Um,
Yeah.
and to me, there's very few things that are more important to being a free society than the ability to speak freely.
Hmm.
And it wasn't just free speech, though. I'm really a First Amendment absolutist, and there are many things that really flow from the First Amendment. Our freedom to assemble, our
Hmm.
freedom to associate, and our freedom to worship where and when we please. And without so much as a conversation, without so much as anything, every single one of those extremely important First Amendment rights were being completely abridged. And as a lawyer, I am very aware there is no public health emergency exception to our Constitution. In fact, there is no exception to our Constitution, written in our Constitution. And so this really started to raise alarm bells for me as well. And, after Jamie said that to me, he said something else. He said, if you don't believe me, prove me wrong. Go do the research. Show me where I'm wrong.
Hmm.
And so I said to him, okay, I will. And then I started to actually do real research and found out um, most everything I believed was a lie. Most
Hmm.
everything I believed was a result of indoctrination and propaganda and brainwashing and programming. And, it was a real, as they say, a real red pill that was hard to swallow.
Yeah, that is hard to swallow.
Yeah, I mean,
How did you emotionally, how did you deal with that?
not well. I don't think most people do. I've met a lot of people who have similar or different, awakening stories, and
Yeah.
it's not easy.
No.
Going through that and coming out of it was the hardest thing I've ever done, even harder than
Wow.
losing my parents.
Wow.
Because for me, being a DC person, being not just I mean, I went to Georgetown Law School in the middle of the 20 years that I lived there. I still
Oh.
worked while I was going.
Oh, okay.
And I was president of the Georgetown Law Democrats. Okay. I was like really hardcore. My identity
Dang.
was completely wrapped up in my Democratic
Hmm.
um, being a Democrat and being a liberal, as they called it.
Yeah.
Although I don't think there's anything liberal about the Democratic Party anymore. They're radical progressives progressing us towards communism, is what I think they're progressing us towards. But at this
Yeah.
point, but everything about me was wrapped up in that, and then
Right.
also, obviously I'm highly educated. So how did they fool me?
Big time.
And the one thing that I could, rely on was my brain. And now I couldn't rely on that anymore. And how did they do that? And how do I make sure it doesn't happen again? And, what? So I was very depressed. As
Oh,
you might
yeah.
imagine, lost most of my friends, and some of my family as a result of this. And so it was not easy. Some people call it, I had to go through what you might call the dark night of the soul. And
That's
I
a good word
also
for it. That's good. That's good. That's good language. Where'd you get that language?
I've heard it in a variety of places. I don't recall a particular in particular where.
Okay.
But yeah, a dark night of the soul. And
I can tell you where it comes from. It comes from St. John of the Cross. He's a an old writer from a long time ago, centuries ago, but that's where it originally comes from that guy.
it was definitely not there that I heard it, but
Yeah,
I'm
right.
sure that's
It's been
maybe
passed
where
down.
the person I've heard it, yeah, had heard it from. So
Yeah.
I really had to do a lot of soul searching, and I also, there is a very strong elitism on the left, a feeling of intellectual and moral superiority, which many people on the right feel, but very few on the left will acknowledge, and because I do that. But I also had to come to terms with my previous belief about my fellow humans who just happen to have different political opinions that I did, and the way in which I treated them sometimes, and the way in which or I talked about them sometimes. And so it was a lot of it was very challenging, and it was a lot of doing something that many people in our society and probably the world, but I can only really speak to our society these days, have a lot of trouble with, and that was holding myself accountable for who I was, and then I had to decide who it was I wanted to become. And that is also something that is, challenging to do. And I think but I would say very hard, but so worth it, because there's nothing that compares to having a free mind again, which I don't feel like I did prior to that awakening.
Can I dip into your, just because I'm an educator and I'm always curious about, kind of the formation, the institutional formation. Did you go to public school as like K through 12?
So I was actually homeschooled until fifth grade, and
Okay.
then did go to public school. Moved
Mhm.
around a little bit, and then junior high, as they used to call it, and I guess it's middle school now, but
Yeah,
and
we
high
called it junior
school.
high too.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
I
Okay.
like junior high. Let's stick with that.
Okay. So junior high and high school, I was in public school. In yeah, but
What state was that? Was that Illinois, did you say?
it was Illinois. Yes, it was
Did you
Illinois.
did you
Um,
feel like it was a good education that you got in K through 12?
I felt like I got a pretty good education. Yeah, I felt like, there were a lot of things that I learned that you don't. I think these days, I think K to 12 education has changed so much since the time I went to school. But
Yeah.
I remember learning a lot about like personal economics, for example, like balancing a checkbook, like what interest is, what compound interest is, which I feel like a lot of people don't learn kids don't learn in school today. My parents taught me also, but I do recall learning that in school. I also had a really good understanding of our Constitution. And I don't
Do you
believe a
feel like
lot
you
of,
got that from school or
I
from
feel like
home?
it was a combination of the two. I think I got some of it from my parents, who were also what I would consider free speech absolutists,
Okay.
no matter how hard it was. But I also did. I remember my American history class. I remember learning about the Bill of Rights. I remember talking about the Bill of Rights in high
Did, and
school.
and you had an emotional connection with it? You saw it was good?
Oh yeah, it was taught in a positive way. It was not
Yeah.
taught in.
Was this a rural area, suburban or urban?
It was suburban, uh,
Suburban, okay.
south suburbs of Chicago, far south suburbs, but the suburbs of Chicago.
Okay. All right. I'm glad you clarified far south. Just to give an idea of what goes into
Oh,
making.
you're breaking up. Sorry.
That's all right. Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah. I,
Okay, good.
I can.
Yeah, I've been getting little signals from our recording system that there's some internet instability here. Must be the election from yesterday. Just kidding. But
Maybe.
maybe, who knows? Uh but yeah, I was so did you go straight into college from high school?
I did, yeah. I went straight into college. My undergraduate was at Northwestern, also in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
I was on the debate team.
What
And,
did you major in?
I started out a sociology major and I switched. I got my bachelor's is in communication and rhetoric.
Okay. And so
So
you were on the debate team
I was, yes.
all 4 years or
At Northwestern, I only actually did two. I decided that I wanted to have somewhat of um, was a pretty overwhelming commitment, and so I decided I ended up only doing the first 2 years.
okay. Gotcha. Uh, how long from your undergrad did it did your MSW at DU? How long was that? Did you go right into that?
So I graduated. No, it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do, and
Hmm.
it was 6 years in between
Hmm.
the two,
Somehow you ended up down
and
in
I had a
Denver.
variety of. Yep, they have a good social work program, and
Hmm.
they had some professors that I was interested in taking some classes with there for sure.
I went to school for my first master's right down the street from DU, on University Boulevard in Inglewood there, a place called Denver Seminary. And it was right
Oh,
on Hampton and University. That's where the old campus was. That's where I went to school. And I worked just down the street from that too for a while at Cherry Hills Country Club.
Oh, wow.
I was the head of the valet department. Um, yeah, so I know that area very well. Grew up there, grew up in Littleton, um, product of Jefferson County Public School. So I'm interested in what goes into, yeah, because you remind me of people I went to high school with. You remind me of the kind of Democrats I grew up around, which are I'm in contact with some of them still, but um, uh, basically very similar to myself in a lot of ways. Probably agreeing about most of the First Amendment, most of the stuff. Might be some disagreement about obscenity back in the 80s, pornography, burning the flag, stuff like that. But uh, all the other stuff on the First Amendment probably would be very, very, very similar. Um, and then some disagreements about the Second Amendment. That's what I always remembered was that there was always the Second Amendment seemed to be where the big flare up was. The Fourth Amendment stuff. I think I started taking the Fourth Amendment a lot more seriously when I was later in life. I feel like I don't think I took it as seriously as I should have. Um,
Yeah, I don't think any of us maybe did. I think we
hmm,
kind of took it for granted. Except, I was pretty upset about the impact that the war on drugs had on the
yeah,
Fourth Amendment, and I saw
mhm,
it slowly being chipped away at. The
right.
warrant requirement through the good faith exception. And I have
Uh-huh.
nothing but respect for law enforcement. It's
Hmm.
not about that. It's not about assuming that they're bad guys. It's about the fact that once you start chipping away at a statement like, and no warrant shall issue without probable cause and no search without a warrant, once you start chipping away at that, it slowly starts to disappear. And I think
Mm,
it put us in the position where when September 11th happened,
yeah.
then the Patriot Act came in and
Hmm.
goodbye, Fourth Amendment.
Hmm.
Um, uh, I always talk to people, and I also talk about this in the book, um, that
Tell us
the
what your book is called.
it's called Deprogramming Democrats and Uneducating the Elites: How I Escaped the Progressive Cult.
Wow, by Lisa Ekman.
Correct, yes, it is.
Where is it available?
It is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and
Cool.
you could check out my website if you like,
Sure, yeah.
deprogrammingdemocrats.com.
Okay. Glad you said all that, and we'll have you say it again later, okay?
Okay.
But I wanted to have you say it a couple times so that deprogrammingdemocrats.com and then that book, your book, can you just search on your name and it comes up?
You can search on my name or just put in deprogramming and Democrats, then it comes up. Yeah.
We'll put a link into the description so people just can click on
Excellent.
it. And I'm glad that it's on Barnes and Noble too. That's cool.
Yeah.
I feel weird giving Amazon all the all the business. I just feel like in 2020 when I saw what Amazon was doing to local bookstores, I'm a huge fan of local bookstores, and our local bookstore I thought was going to close down. They reopened because whoever's running that place has got some really good business savvy sense or something. I don't know how they survived, but they did, and they're still here. We're really happy about that. I always tell people support your local bookstore, buy physical books if you can. Can they get it on a physical book that will be
Yeah.
sent to them?
It is available in paperback. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool. Get that. Get it sent to you.
Yeah, and if you get it, you can also on my website get it from my publisher directly too, if you
Really?
want to.
What's your
Yeah,
publisher's name?
Liberty Hill Publishing.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's sort of a in between a self publisher and a full service publisher. So, and it's kind of cool. They do sort of print on demand. So I don't have to pre-buy the books. Like if you go to their website, they'll print a book right away and get it out to you within a day or two. Um,
Nice.
yeah, I really did enjoy working with them on this book. But I did decide to self-publish because I didn't want anybody telling me what could be said or not said in my book,
Yeah.
or having any delays or anything like that. So
Awesome. Liberty Hill Publisher. That's awesome. I love that name. I also love the flag that you have in the background too. Were you always a fan of the flag?
I was, yeah.
Okay.
I remember back, so I was like 7 years old when we celebrated our bicentennial.
Hmm.
And I just remember everybody, it didn't matter who you voted for, it didn't matter who, everybody had their flag and they were waving it and they were proud and they were patriotic. And it wasn't,
I miss
obviously.
those days.
I do too. I do too. And I think, there's among my parents and old liberals, classical liberals or JFK Democrats or however you want to refer to them,
Hmm.
there was a decent amount of skepticism of the government, which I think it's our civic responsibility in many ways to be skeptical and hold
Yeah.
our government to account. But that didn't undermine our belief in the beauty of the American experiment or the beauty of our Bill of Rights, unlike any other Bill of Rights in the history of civilizations. And we didn't used to think that because you disagreed with us politically, that you were morally inferior or some kind of moral failing or anything like that. Different, I think, understanding of what it meant to be an American, and there wasn't a negativity like there is now around America and what it means to be an American.
Hmm.
So,
You've used the word
but
progressive
I
cult.
also,
Did you hear that, what I
yes,
just said? Okay. What do you
yes,
mean
I
by
did.
that term progressive cult? What
So
do
what
you
I mean is that, like many former Democrats, I would say that I didn't leave the party, it left me.
mean?
And the progressive cult the is progressives, people who believe in gender ideology, who believe in abortion on demand up until birth, people who believe in a lot of these social uh, justice ideas,
Mhm.
who have sort of taken over the party and who believe that there's sort of a requirement for what I call ideological conformity. And if you don't conform, then they kick you out. And there is a level of uh, belief in government that is what I would say like a religious belief in nature. So the people on the left now worship authority and they idolize the expert. And if you don't go in lockstep with that, then you are excommunicated, you're canceled. And there are very specific things, that will get you kicked out. Um, and you can see really cult like behavior. For example, I have met so many people whose children who have stopped talking to them because they voted for Donald Trump.
Wow.
Or because, yeah, it's really, really sad. And often it's actually because their partner has forced them to, because their parents voted for Donald Trump. And there are a lot of families that don't talk. And what do cults make you do? They make you give up your family, and if you see some people, some young people who quote unquote transition, which that's a whole other topic we can get into if you want to, but I only mention it now because it's the same thing. They will say, well, if your parents won't affirm you, then you should not talk to your parents anymore and just talk to us because we're your new family now. And that's very cult like.
Wow.
So I think there are many ways in which it is like a cult, and fear is used to keep people in line in the cult. And there is really I think a sort of religious like devotion to the party. And I would have said, and many people will say, vote blue no matter who. And that is very, again, a cult like mantra. I'm
Oh,
not going to think. All that matters is that they're one of us. They're one of us. So then I'm going to vote for them. And so that's why I call it the progressive cult. And I think that, as we have seen, they will uh, if you don't toe the line. One of the other issues that I found myself sort of at odds with them was on immigration. And um, you really couldn't have any sort of nuanced perception on it or position on it, or you were racist. You know, Immediately you're racist and you can't be one of us. And, I am all for legal immigration for people who want to assimilate into our culture. But I also believe in the rule of law. And I also believe that it's unfair to people who follow the rules to let people just come you know, um, and then get social services that taxpayers pay for when they aren't here legally. I don't agree with any of that. So that made it really difficult for me to be a Democrat anymore.
yeah. Yeah.
So these are the kind of things. I mean, the ideological conformity, and the consequences for not conforming is excommunication,
Yeah.
really.
Okay. That makes sense. What do you feel like really drew you to the Democrats? What i- is it? Um, is it the disability services angle, or was there a deeper principle?
Yeah, I think, my parents had a belief in the fact that government could make things better. That if I think I had an innate desire for the world to be, that the world is never going to be fair, and that uh, I wanted government and the unfairness that I saw in the world. And I think my parents sort of wanted that too. And I think that is what really drew me to the Democrats. And like I said, when I was younger, Democrats actually believed in the First Amendment Constitution in a way that they no longer do. So I felt at home there in that way. And, I didn't, it was hard for me to see, people being poor or not having food or those kind of things. And there is a belief on the left that, people on the right or people who aren't like them don't care about the people who are struggling, which I find to be completely not true. It's just a question of how do you address that,
Yeah. Okay.
and who should be addressing that.
Right.
There's definitely more of a belief um, around community and church and things like that. But I wanted to see, I think that's probably what drew me there. A lot of it was just that my parents were, and so that's what I got at home
Yeah.
as my
And
background.
and did you find like it was reinforced in college and graduate school?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think, I went to social work school in the middle, in from 97 to 99. And I don't think it was quite as widespread more generally then, but political correctness was out of control at social work school. And I found myself getting into, even at that stage, some pretty heated conversations with my classmates, which my professors did not do a very good job of mediating. Um, and I can give you one example. Even back then, they were talking about white privilege,
Hmm.
excuse me, in a class. And, I, at the time, just raised the question. I said, so you're telling me you think that a white child born to a single crack addicted mom, homeless, has privilege over a middle class black child with two parents, in a nice suburban home. And everyone in the class, even back then, was like, yeah, most definitely. And I was like, I don't agree with you. I just don't. And now I can point to research that points out that if you control for socioeconomic status at birth, as well as whether or not it's a single or a two-parent household, income disparities between about race pretty much disappear. Disparities don't, because we haven't addressed some historic wealth inequality. But so even at that time, I was like, are you kidding me? I can't see this privilege that this poor crack addicted, baby has over someone else. But so that, I think, gives you an example of graduate school. I really saw that happen. And at Georgetown, at the law school, when I was there, I think it is over 90% Democratic professors. So
Sure.
at the time, I loved that. I thought
Yeah.
it was just what I
You probably
already
thought it was
believed.
normal and
But now,
nothing wrong with that.
yeah, exactly. But I will tell you, one of my favorite classes that I actually ended up having to drop out of because my dad got sick in the middle of law school. But it was something called Issues in Constitutional Theory, and it was taught by one liberal professor and one conservative professor, and then other eminent constitutional scholars came and presented their brand new papers to us, which we critiqued. And I found that to be extremely fascinating. And I actually often sometimes agreed with the conservative professor about the Constitution. But in general, if you didn't attempt to, you probably did not learn any law from a conservative at Georgetown.
Wow. Do you remember the name of the guy? Was it Randy Barnett?
The conservative,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm blanking on it. I could find out and I can
Yeah.
email again, let you know, but I don't remember off the top of my head. Because, like I said, that was when my dad got sick and I couldn't, it was a very high workload class because we were
Oh, I
reading
bet.
constitutional papers every week
Oh,
and having to
man.
write papers on them. And I just
Yeah.
couldn't keep up. And they were really accommodating, but at one point they just said, look, it's not fair. We can't keep you in this class. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha. Hmm. Man, that sounds tough. That to have that. Uh, you were working at the same time, right?
I was working for a government contractor, helping implement a federal program for employment for people with disabilities. I
Wow.
think at that point, third year, that was third year, so I think I was working 30 hours a week
That's a
and
lot.
doing school full
Yeah.
time and commuting back and forth from Chicago. It was, yeah, it was.
Wow. Really? Jeez. Man, that's crazy. Uh, you know, when you sat down to write this book, um, what did you hope to accomplish with the book? Can you hear me?
So
Or
there were, yes, yeah, yeah, there
okay.
were a few things that I was trying to accomplish. The first thing was to um, help people who have a loved one who is in the cult understand what has happened to them. And there are suggestions in the book of how to help someone wake up if someone you love is still um, programmed and indoctrinated. Um, Also to help people who may have already just woken up to understand what happened to them and understand there are other people who have gone through it. I mean, one of the things that I didn't mention when we were talking earlier is that one of the things that happens to you, in addition to becoming really depressed, is that you think you're going crazy. I mean, you think
Yeah.
you're losing your mind, and so being able to read what someone else went through and understand that, and you're not going crazy. You're not losing your mind, you're reclaiming it, is the way that I talk about it in the book. And so to be there for them. And then if there is someone, I know that the title is going to be pretty off-putting for most people who are still Democrats. But if there is someone who is questioning it, um, to give them an opportunity to have someone talk to them about her experience, my experience. And one of the things that has happened, and with the indoctrination that occurs in schools, is that the left has attempted to sort of create a monopoly on knowledge, right? If you haven't gone through their schools and gotten their accreditation, their licensure, or their certificate, whatever they require, then you're not an expert and you're not to be listened to. But I think with my credentials, you can't say you can't listen to me. So I am someone who, I hope that if someone who is still on the left looked at it, and they can't discount me outright, as they do most people who are not experts in their mind or members of the cult. And so to provide that sort of counterbalance in the event that someone might be open to even taking a look at it. So what I really hope to accomplish as well is, I saw, as we were uh, in the Biden administration, I saw we were sliding pretty quickly down a slippery slope of losing our First Amendment rights. We had them basically establishing a ministry of truth, which they then quickly repealed. But because of the outrage, but I felt that if there was 8 years of a Biden administration, or as we saw, if the last minute substitution with no votes to save democracy, if she would have won, that we might pass a point of no return on our
Yeah.
First Amendment rights, and to try to help in any way I could to save the country that I love. So
Mm. That's a worthy cause for sure. This is totally out of left field or maybe right field. I don't know. But and just so everybody knows, I just met Lisa. I haven't read the book, but my goal in this podcast is similar to what you're doing, is to have a welcoming space for people that want to poke in and prod in and learn more and like what you said, reclaim their mind. And so that and I think the First Amendment is a wonderful pole to grab onto for, in this hurricane. And I'm so glad you did hold on to that. I'm hoping that other people do too. Like when you said about the censorship in the Biden administration, this podcast is still censored by the Biden administration. And it's hard to believe. It's hard. One of the most devious things about censorship is that if someone tells you they were censored, it's tempting to not believe them because you never saw what they said is censored, right? So I
yeah,
mean that's kind of the point. That's the harm is it's hard to even talk about it. And this is going to go up on YouTube, and YouTube is what censored. It still has, to this day, has censored videos from the Biden administration. And now we know it was from pressure from the White House, top down, and government pressure to take down some videos. We had 3 videos taken down. If you get 3 strikes, your channel goes away. And we did escape, this channel did escape being taken off completely, but the threat was there that it would be taken off completely. And now this is the interesting thing, and this is where I would probe anybody that wants to check out your book and is going to be in part of your reading audience. I would also say, hey, please do check me if I'm wrong. Go on to Apple Podcasts because Apple Podcasts never did censor these things. So you can see for yourself or actually hear for yourself. It's not an image that was censored, it was audio. So they took the video down because it's the audio as well. But the audio is up of Heidi St. John's episode from 2022, the spring, and Lance Wallnau's episode. Those are still censored to this day on YouTube. And the thing is when they take it down, they don't tell you, they give you a reason, but it's so vague. It's, it smells arbitrary and capricious.
Mhm.
And the problem is you can't nail them down because they don't tell you the minute and second that the problem was. They don't tell you that. You have to guess. They just say it violated this policy, but the policy is never explained why it has anything to do with that video. But they did use the words dangerous to the community. And I mean, have them. I have the emails. They send you an email, so I have the emails, and you could just compare that. Anybody who is interested in this and wants to drill down and see if I'm crazy and see if you're crazy can go on Apple Podcasts or they're on Rumble. You can go on Rumble. There you can see. You're not going to see anything that's interesting, but it's the words that were censored, and I can guess why they took it down, but I have to guess. They make you guess, and then okay, you can file appeal. Well, I'm filing an appeal based on my guess, so if they deny the appeal, I still don't know why. You know, it's that's part of the thing that makes you feel like you're going crazy. But you can just listen to the whole thing and see, was there anything in there that was dangerous? And the answer is clearly no. It's not. It's not dangerous. It's arbitrary and capricious, and it was just a shot across the bow saying, "Hey, we can take down your whole voice, your whole being." And by the way, Heidi St. John was a candidate for Congress at the time. So that was, I consider that election interference.
Mhm.
And she was, here's the ironic thing, she was running against somebody that Trump endorsed. That's the ironic thing. It's totally ironic. Now, it was in the primary, but, you know, Republican primary. But, um, but it's insidious. So I'm with you on the First Amendment thing, and I feel like my views on the Second Amendment have really helped me uh, understand more the complaints that people had about the war on drugs and the war on and the like what you said about the chipping away of the Fourth Amendment. Because we felt like we had the Second Amendment being chipped away at in California here. And so it, you know, you started feeling like kind of paranoid after a while, like, wow, these people are really, they seem to have an agenda that's really arbitrary. They would just do arbitrary things like ban a certain feature of a rifle, like, um, like a telescoping stock, which sounds fancy, but when you see it, it's just, you can move it like back and forth like 2 inches or whatever.
Mhm.
That if you have that on a rifle, it's a felony now. You go from a model citizen like Eagle Scout to civil death. it's, it's like what? And a lot of people, like I talk to people all the time and they don't even know it's illegal. Like they don't know that they would be a felon. So I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
then if they get pulled over, right?
oh
You know,
yeah.
that's when I started thinking about the Fourth Amendment. I was like, oh man, this is the civil liberty aspect of this. Like I started thinking about my Democrat friends who were really probably took the Fourth Amendment a lot more seriously than I did, and I started learning from them. But it was my Second Amendment angle. But sorry, I cut you off.
No, well, what I was going to say is I've had a complete 180 on the Second Amendment as well. You
Mhm.
know, I mean, the programming and
Tell us
indoctrination
about that. I'm interested in hearing that.
about guns. I was very anti-gun. You know, I
Hmm.
was very much a believer that I bought into all the propaganda, and you know, I talk actually. the reporting of gun deaths is one of the examples of media bias that I give in the book about how we've been propagandized.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, but I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I thought we need to protect these kids. We need to, get guns out of the hands of people. And, who in the world needs a quote unquote assault rifle, which I now own some of that are legal.
Hmm.
But I bought the propaganda. But I also now understand how important it is, because I understand that if the government, I mean, we've already lost the Fourth Amendment,
Yeah.
and the one of the most important amendments I think that nobody ever really talks about is the 10th Amendment,
Right.
because that practically doesn't exist anymore. And in case anyone listening doesn't know, that's the one that says if this Constitution doesn't specifically give the federal government a power, it belongs to the state and the people. And that has been completely gutted, mostly by, I would say, the Supreme Court's jurisdiction around the Interstate Commerce Clause,
Mm-hmm.
as well as their interpretation of the power of the purse, quote unquote, meaning if they give money to you, they can put pretty much almost any requirements with that money. Um, and so,
Yeah.
with those two things, the 10th Amendment gutted, the Fourth Amendment gone. What do we have left that keeps us at all free? The First Amendment.
Yeah.
And as they're going after that, what do we have left then? We have the second. And I
Hmm.
really hope it never, ever, ever gets to the fact that we have to use it. But our founders made it very clear that if your government becomes tyrannical, that's when you don't just have they almost give you the obligation, the duty,
Yeah.
and the Second Amendment is extremely important to that. And I understand that
Well,
it's
to your point, all tyrants agree with what you just said because that's what they go after first. I mean, well, yeah, I mean, they go after that first because if you take that away, then any First Amendment liberty or equivalent in a different country would be really easy to take. Yeah, or any Fourth Amendment, basically any private property rights or any kind of, taking rights, against takings.
I think
Would,
you just have to look at what's going on in the UK to prove the point that you're just making.
yeah,
They disarmed them,
right.
and now I can't remember, but I think it's over 10,000 arrests for free speech violations in the UK last
Jeez,
year.
wow.
Yeah.
That's hard to
So
believe.
yeah, and I was talking to someone on a podcast out of the UK, and he said offline to me, he said, "Yeah, what you're seeing online is happening, and it's actually worse. It's worse than what
Wow.
you're seeing." So
Wow.
um, yeah, and I fully recognize now the real importance of our Second Amendment rights. And it changed so much. I mean, I remember back when I was a kid, like there used to be shooting clubs at school, right? And kids would bring their rifle on the truck to high school, not into the high school, but um,
Right.
in order to go hunting after school or whatever. And it's just a really different
Yeah.
environment that we live in now. And there is very strong propaganda that highlights very, very uh, not typical gun violence issues in order to make people afraid. And the
Yeah.
biggest control mechanism there is fear.
Hmm.
And we see that all throughout identity politics. We see that all throughout um, what happened with COVID. And it's all fear based. And that is part of what they do around the Second Amendment as well.
Wow. What was that like? If you don't mind, I'd be really interested in just hearing. what was that like when, given your background, you said you had a couple of assault rifles or something like that?
Oh, I mean, I after we moved to the farm in 2020, I exercised my constitutional rights and, bought some weapons. A lot of
So
them
can I
are for hunting and things like that,
can I can I ask you when you made a decision to do that, to buy your first gun? I don't know if it was your first gun or whatever, but was it your first?
Was a rifle my first? No,
Or
my
just
first.
whatever, your first gun.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
old were you?
I never had a gun until I moved to this farm. I never
Okay.
fired a firearm besides a BB gun from when I was a kid
Uh-huh.
until 2020.
Okay, well, a BB gun, that's more than some people. So, okay, I'm interested. So you had this decision, you woke up one morning or you went to bed before or whatever, and you made this decision. You're like, you know what? I'm going to buy a gun. And you're like fully grown adult. I mean, you're like retiring, right? You said you were going to retire.
I
Um,
had just retired, just moved to the country, woke up, all these things. Yep.
what were you nervous
It was, I
uh,
mean, maybe
about
the
buying it?
best.
About buying the gun?
I was, yeah. It was very surreal to me.
Did you have
A
any
lot of
did you have
things.
any friends that were helping you that knew about guns, or did you have a
Uh,
community?
Yes, we had a few, mostly through my partner. He knows people who had, more guns. Most of my friends were like me, so no, they
Okay.
didn't,
Yeah. They're
have
not going to
guns.
be of much
But
help.
no, not at all. But there were people that Jamie knew that we talked to, um, and we there was a gun store that we went to, and the people were really really helpful and
Okay.
really
Well,
talk through what are you buying it for, what do you need, here's the options and that kind of thing.
okay.
Um, it felt really really strange. It felt like
I
and
bet.
the first time I fired it was very, yeah, it was really weird. It was just a very strange experience.
Hmm.
Um, and I felt extremely uncomfortable. But I will tell you that when you live on a farm and you have
Yeah.
chickens and you have a garden and you need to protect the things that you have, and it's a very different idea
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Uh, so the reason I'm asking is because I've helped people out here in California buy their first gun before, and it was actually in 2020. I had people reaching out. I had people that were actually for the Second Amendment. They just never had a gun before, and they in 2020 was happening, and I think it was before the riots, but it was like, yeah, I think it was actually before the riots. I think it was just kind of a spidey sense that some people were getting that they felt more vulnerable all of a sudden, and that the government wasn't really going to be there to help them, and so I helped some people buy guns for the first time, and I would walk them through and show them something I had, show them how to take it apart, show them how to clean it. Nothing too technical, but just broadly speaking, like how to get your nerves under control and how to handle the thing. I mean, just don't like grab it barely. You make sure you make sure you're controlling the thing, and you're in charge of it. It's not in charge of you. You're in charge of it, and that you understand how it functions so that you can feel calm over time. It might not be right away, but over time, once you understand how it functions, you understand that there's certain habits you need to make sure it's unloaded when you're cleaning it. Um, making sure it's pointed in a safe direction, even if it's unloaded, just having these habits of safety. And it's always helpful to have a community and somebody that has a pleasant voice and somebody you trust to take you through how how you can be in charge of it. It's not going to be magically in charge of you. Because a lot of the anti-gun people I meet, the Democrats and stuff that I grew up with, they had this feeling I think it was a nervous system issue for them where their brain just shut down and like they couldn't think and
Mhm.
they had this fear, like you're saying, fear that this object could control you somehow.
I
And
mean,
totally,
yeah,
you can work through it though. You can work through it.
you can, but I think you're right. I remember, way back in my 20s, I worked as a bartender in Chicago, and we used to have cops come in, and they'd be eating, and some of them asked us to put their gun behind the bar so that they could just relax. And I remember having to touch it, and I was
Hmm.
like, "Oh my god!" And it's in the safety's on, it's in the, uh, but yeah, there is this irrational fear. I mean, because we're all like when all of the propaganda around these high-profile mass shootings is blaming the weapon and not the individual pulling the trigger. So it gets this sort of almost, yes, it's the guns, it's not the people, it's the guns, it's the guns. So I think that's part of what that is. And there's just this, so I had to get over that too,
Yeah,
myself. And I'm just well,
that's a big accomplishment for you.
thank you. I
Yeah,
mean,
big time.
it is. I think the biggest thing I can say about what I think I have accomplished in all of this is letting go of the fear that was used to control me. Um,
Wow.
and I 100% believe that fear controls most people on the left.
Whoa.
And most of them don't even know it.
Can you say that again? Letting go of the fear.
That controlled me.
Okay. I think that's a cool title. I'm going to try it out as a title for this episode.
All right. I
I
like
don't
it.
know. There's a certain amount of words, characters I have unlimited to, so I got to play around with various things. But now let's make sure that people know where to get your book. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's on Amazon. In fact, I'm gonna pull up Amazon. I know I told you that I didn't want to ever always get them to get the get the credit, but okay, yours came up right away. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm going to click on it and let's see if I can share the screen here. I know this is really basic for all the kids here. So I'm sharing the screen and it's called Deprogramming Democrats and Uneducating the Elites: How I Escaped the Progressive Cult. Ooh, you have some reviews on there. Nice
I
job.
do not a lot. Hi, I'm back. I'm sorry, my phone shut down.
Oh, okay. Well, shoot, I was just showing people how to get to your book.
Yes,
Um,
on
Depro.
Amazon,
Mhm.
Barnes and Noble, or my website. So
Deprogramming Democrats and Uneducating the Elites: How I Escaped the Progressive Cult by Lisa Ekman. And it's got a picture of a donkey with blinders on. And then there's a picture of the Constitution in the back of that. That's pretty cool. Yeah, and I wanted to just let everybody know it's Liberty Hill Publishing, and it's available on her website. Do you have a preference of where they get the book?
um I don't. Either
Okay.
way is fine. It's, I understand people. I do like that people buy the actual physical book because um I feel like we need to have real
Yeah,
books.
big time.
Because I watched in real time things being edited during COVID.
Ooh.
Um, and it brings to mind George Orwell, you control the present by controlling the past.
Yeah.
And, I think they do make changes between editions, and online I don't trust much these
Hmm.
days. for a
Yeah.
variety of reasons. So you can buy the book, and
Okay.
anywhere you can buy it is fine. I like you. If you do Barnes and Noble or my publisher, I like that. But if Amazon, I get it. So
Yeah. Okay. I like Barnes and Noble better too. Um, the is that the back here says you have 5 dogs, and I totally didn't ask you about your dogs. What kind of dogs do you have?
we have Dutch Shepherds, and I don't know if you know Dutch Shepherds, but
Not at
they're
all.
they're
Not.
amazing dogs. They're pretty new to the U.S. They're often used in law enforcement, search and rescue. They are amazingly smart, very friendly, but also protective. And I highly recommend them if you have a job for them to do, and or you have land and are going to get them lots of exercise. I highly don't recommend them if you live in an apartment.
Oh
So
yeah, big time.
they're great dogs. And yeah, they're a lot though, but they're great dogs.
So Lisa Ekman is a former Democrat, worked for some pretty high profile people from federal agencies, including some senators, like you maybe have heard of Ted Kennedy, possibly. And she's gone from that to basically buying a gun and having a farm with dogs and chickens um, and is now giving back generously to tell her story in this book. And I'm really interested in this conversation. I thought this was really fascinating. I'm happy to meet you. I feel like I got a new friend here out of this, and
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed meeting you. And the other thing I didn't mention before that I'd like to add here is part of
okay,
why I wrote the book is because we need to have more conversations like this. We
big
need to
time.
have more people talking, and remembering what we have in common instead of letting them divide us in every way they possibly can. Um, and um, you know,
Yeah.
that's the way that we remember that we're all humans and we share things in common. And um, you know, part of what has helped me is I found my own faith, and I think that's another way that we can understand our commonness. And we're
Would you
all
like to tell us about it a little bit? What?
it's my own. I have my own relationship with the creator. I don't go to a church. I don't go to any organized religion, like many on the left. That was very it's not too strong of a word, I don't think, to say that organized religion and the people who follow it were demonized to me. And so, but I find a great deal of strength and courage through that connection. But it also makes me feel way more connected to my fellow humans, that we all, come from the creator, and that we're all
Did you
um,
always believe that, or did you always believe that we had a creator, or did you just recently?
that's a new thing that happened after I woke up and started really searching for meaning and searching for purpose once everything about me sort of disappeared. And so, no, I didn't. I would have been one of the people who, thought would have talked down to religious people, to be honest. I would have denied the very concept of God
Did
before.
did that begin before the farm, or did that have to do with being in a rural environment with around what people call creation, like being in nature?
I
Or
think I think that played a role, but there was definitely, as I said, it was the dark night of my soul. It was a lot of soul searching. It was a lot of looking for meaning and looking for understanding. And I think that is what led me, to find that. But it is a lot harder to deny creation when you stand in the foothills, of the mountains and look at the beauty all around you, and all that. So I definitely think that being out here did contribute to me reconnecting that way.
I'm going to share, since you use that term, Dark Night of the Soul. I hate AI, just FYI, guys. I'm sorry. But it just comes up. But you always have the Wikipedia entry and all this stuff. But the AI is saying The Dark Knight is Sold by St. John of the Cross. It's actually a book that you can buy and read. I had to read it when I was in seminary. And but it's just an interesting language, and I've been through one too. And I think that it's actually, can't believe I'm going to say this, but it's actually geez, it's kind of of a compliment. It's all the Dark Night of the Soul. If you go through one, it's a compliment from God to you, I think. And I don't think I always looked at it that way, and I hesitate to say that to somebody who is going through one because it can be taken the wrong way. But it can feel like you're going through something like abandonment, a metaphysical abandonment, basically. And but but there's a word for it, and it's a concept that it's a phenomenon. It's there. It's out there, and this religious awakening is really really refreshing. It's interesting that you linked it to creation. Sometimes people uh, connect with the Lord on re through a redemptive lens or through like a sin lens, through various, an eschatological lens, like the last things, what's going to happen. But creation is the first thing, right? It's the first thing that happens in Scripture, and it is a foundational thing. And I mean, I feel it every time I'm in nature. It's hard to feel, for me, it's hard to feel a deep sense, profound sense of the awesomeness of creation. And I mean that in the classical sense of awesome. When you're just around in like an apartment living, or, you're around a lot of people, because people are so corrupt and just, I mean, we obviously are created in the image of God, and we have infinite value and worth as individuals, is what I believe, um, as the scripture teaches. But the creational aspect of it, I think, is best sense in nature. And and I'm kind of jealous of you that you have a farm. I mean, that sounds so awesome. The 5 dogs? Are you kidding me? That sounds great. And chickens? How many chickens do you
Chickens.
have?
At the moment, there are 7 hens and one rooster.
Do they lay eggs?
They do, and that's primarily what we have them for. We don't process them to eat them, but
Yeah.
we had a lot more until a fox got in the hen house.
Oh crap, man.
It happens. It's part of what happens, and that's what you have your weapons for too out here. So there is no more
Wow.
fox. But the yeah, I mean, it is really great. There's nothing I love more than when I sit down to the table and most of what is on my plate I grew, or
Wow.
it's eggs or things like that. And I've learned about medicinal plants. I've learned how to use them, how to grow them, how to process them. I've learned I can walk around my property and I can tell you about plants you should never try to eat and plants that you can eat. And I've learned a lot of things. And I think when you connect to nature in that way, it does definitely bring you closer to divinity, to God.
How many eggs do they produce?
Most chickens will lay about 5 eggs a week. Some chickens will lay every day. And so
That's a lot of
uh,
eggs.
it's a lot of eggs. And I used to share eggs a lot with people. And they say there's something called chicken math, and that's when you get 3 chickens, and then 2 years later you have 20, and you don't know how that happened. That's chicken math. So that's kind of
That's
what
awesome.
happened. I decided I was going to try to, hatch some eggs, which I hadn't done since I was a kid, and so and then you end up with more, and then
Hmm.
that's kind of how it was. So yeah.
And you don't have to worry about your dogs with the chickens?
We do. We have what we call we have runs, and then we have these foraging pods that they're kind of protected the whole time.
Hmm.
Our dogs are pretty well trained now about the chickens, and they kind of just stay away from the birds. But um, we did have some incidents which had to be addressed. But uh, Dutch Shepherds are very smart, and once you tell them the rules, they generally follow them pretty well. So
Do you have snakes on the property?
we do have snakes. We have a pond, and so we
Ooh,
do have some
nice.
copperheads sometimes,
Oh,
which we have to be careful for. But we have lots of black snakes, which we are grateful for, that help keep the rodents away. So, yeah.
wow. Well, Lisa Ekman, it's been an honor and a joy to spend this time with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I really appreciate any opportunity to sort of share my story in the hopes that it can help someone wake up, or help someone wake up, or help restore faith in the possibility that a loved one, someone you care about, is still in there, and maybe you can reach them.
Okay. Deprogrammingdemocrats.com. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. Yeah.
Lisa Ekman, and you can find her book online and on her website. So thanks for joining us.